we've got some names and faces trickling in here, so we'll give everybody a couple more minutes and let everybody in, and then we'll get started. Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here. My name is Christy, and I'm the Executive Director for SSA. Welcome to our September webinar. We are going to be hearing today from Nikki from Broadridge and Tony from DFIN, and they are going to give us a last little update on EDGAR Next before the deadline very quickly approaches us here. And if you do have any questions for them, they are going to be answering them here with us today. So we'll be able to hold all those to the end. And if you think of anything, just shoot them at us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nikki and Tony.
Thank you very much, Christy. Welcome everyone. I'm going to kick things off by walking through our agenda for today. So what we'd like to do is just first just go through an overview of the final rule. We'll discuss the timelines, make sure you're aware of what happens here in 3 days now, so on September 12th, and then what happens on December 19th. And we'll also, Tony will then kick things off and discuss the enrollment process, and she'll walk through user roles. And then I will just have a brief open discussion on the lessons we've learned so far and share some of the common pitfalls that we'd like for you to all pay attention to. And then for the bulk of the session, we're going to open this up to a live Q&A. So please feel free to, ask any questions you like. If we have the answers, we'll answer both myself and Tony. All right. Okay. So first, let's go into the final rule. So next slide, please. All right. So essentially, EDGAR Next, on a high level, right, it is the modernization of the EDGAR system. So the best way I like to, just discuss the rule and share what this means and how it impacts your process today is to do a bit of a contrasting. So EDGAR today, if you have a new filer, you would apply for a Form ID application. You would get your codes, your PMAC, passphrase, CCC, the CIK, and then those codes you would share internally within your organization. You'll share it with your general counsel or your outside counsel. You'll share it with your filing agent, right? So that everyone has the ability to file on behalf of that entity. So today, or before EDGAR Next, this would be the process. And the SEC really doesn't have any visibility into this. The SEC doesn't really know who has those codes, who has access into that account, who can file today on behalf of the entity. And those codes that you got with that Form ID, the passphrase, PMAC, CCC, and that password, right? These codes need to be refreshed. They need to be updated, right? And we can see, we've seen through this EDGAR Next transition that, those codes are not always being kept up to date, or even are lost and maybe, are not being kind of consistently rolled forward as individuals come and go within the organization. So this free-form system today, before EDGAR Next, is essentially what the SEC is addressing. And then also, back in 2016 and 2019, there were two cybersecurity events that took place. And when these events took place, there was some difficulty identifying the culprits in a timely fashion. So EDGAR Next is now addressing that as well. So through the modernization of the EDGAR system, the SEC is applying or implementing 3 new security layers. The first one is called login.gov. So they are mandating the use of login.gov for all individuals who access any EDGAR sites. So you might be familiar with login.gov for maybe some other statutory reporting for the organization, but it is now your barrier to entry. It is where the SEC will identify the individual who wants access into the EDGAR site. And then also multi-factor authentication is implemented, okay? Now, second security layer is the SEC. They are implementing something called a filer API token. Now, this is a digital encrypted security token. And that digital encrypted security token, it is essentially identifying which entity is making that submission to the EDGAR system. So for example, let's say you're ABC company and you are, Broadridge is filing your proxy. So when Broadridge goes to file your proxy under EDGAR Next, Broadridge will have a filer API token that indicates to the SEC that Broadridge is making that submission on behalf of ABC company. Okay, the third security layer is something called a user API token, another digital encrypted security token that will be accompanying that filer API token. And so both will be attached to every submission submitted to the EDGAR system via software. Now, the user API token, it identifies the individual who actually presses that button and submits the filing to the EDGAR system. So if I'm at Broadridge and I'm making that submission of that proxy for ABC company, I will be submitting that proxy with Broadridge's filer API token, as well as my individual user API token. This is where the individualized tracking comes into play. This is how the SEC is addressing this security gap. So now under EDGAR Next, the login.gov is required for all users or all individuals who want to access any EDGAR site. And then the filer API token and the user API token must accompany every single submission via software. So that filer API token, in this case example, was Broadridge. It can also be, of course, the entity. So if ABC company is filing their own 10Q, submitting their 10Q directly to the EDGAR system using software, right? They would leverage their own filer API token for ABC company, and then the user API token for the individual at ABC company making that submission. All right, so those are the 3 security layers. Now let's talk about account administration. So going forward, that free-form structure that I discussed is really moving into a much more structured system to administer all of your EDGAR accounts. Essentially, the SEC is going to now have visibility into how each and every CIK is being managed. So the codes, the CCC, the CCC stays intact. The PMAC, the passphrase, and what you formerly knew as the password is gone, right? You will not need that anymore under the EDGAR Next system. And then account administration, right? Account administration is now required on every single CIK. So it's a minimum of 2 account administrators and a maximum of 20 for any company CIK. For individuals, the requirement is at minimum one account administrator, and you can have, of course, a maximum of 20. But we do highly recommend that you have no less than 2 account administrators on any CIK. So account administration is required, right? Now going forward, the SEC is mandating active administration of your EDGAR accounts. That means keeping all of your information up to date, having these active account administrators. It means delegating filing authority to any filing agents that file on your behalf, for example, or to any other entity that can make a submission for that filer. So active account administration is required. Also, a very important task, an annual confirmation is required by a set deadline every single year in order to maintain your compliance with EDGAR. Okay. All right, so with that rule overview, I will now move over to discussing the timelines. All right, so there was, with the EDGAR Next ruling, the SEC provided phased-in compliance deadlines. So on September 30th, we'll just go backwards a bit, September 30th, that is when the beta, which is essentially a testing site for EDGAR Next, opened. This is where we, where folks would actually test out the system, get familiarized with it, learn the ins and outs of how that EDGAR Next system will impact you. So the beta site opened September 30th, and then enrollment opened on March 24th, 2025. So during this period, this is when the Form ID, amended Form ID went into effect, was on March 24th. So any new filers would have had to apply for that Form ID in order to get access. So in this timeline, starting with March 24th, this is when you could begin transitioning your credentials into the new system, right? Now, up until September 12th, 2025, which is in 3 days, the legacy EDGAR system is also available alongside your EDGAR Next system. So from March 24th to September 12th, everyone had access to both the legacy EDGAR system and the new EDGAR Next system. So this gave that 6-month transition period where you could enroll in EDGAR Next, but still file using legacy EDGAR until you are really comfortable and you have everything set up properly in the EDGAR Next system. So there's no disruption in your filings. So come September 15th, Monday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern, the EDGAR system will reopen and it'll now be EDGAR Next. There will be no option to file using legacy EDGAR, right? You will have to file any submission using the EDGAR Next platform. Now, the EDGAR Next platform is open September 15th to file. Now, through December 19th, from September 15th to December 19th, you don't have the legacy EDGAR platform anymore, but what you do still have is the ability to enroll in EDGAR Next. So between these 2 dates, September 15th to December 19th, if you haven't enrolled in EDGAR Next, you can still do so. The only thing you do not have is that ability to file using legacy EDGAR. So if a CIK went to make a submission come September 15th after 6 a.m., right, they will not be able to do so using the legacy EDGAR platform. They would have to enroll in EDGAR Next in order to make that submission. So now, December 19th, that date is when enrollment ends. That's when you can no longer enroll in EDGAR Next. And that's when the SEC will deactivate every CIK for non-compliance. So any CIK who has not enrolled and transitioned to EDGAR Next will be considered non-compliant, and the SEC will deactivate those CIKs on December 19th. Okay. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. So now let's just kind of talk through the scope, the filers, the EDGAR filers that are required to enroll. Just want to simply put it first, all EDGAR filers must enroll in EDGAR Next. So if you're an existing filer, right, you already have those codes, you've been actively filing, you will need to enroll in EDGAR Next. If you are new or unregistered, you would need to enroll in EDGAR Next. This would be via the Form ID. Any legal successors will need to enroll. Section 16 filers, your directors or officers, needs to enroll in EDGAR Next. And then if you are leveraging any of the EDGAR Next APIs, which that is generally at the filing agent level or certain law firms, right? Then you would need to also enroll in EDGAR Next. So it's just really important. The scope is to state that the scope is very extensive here, right? All EDGAR filers should be enrolling in EDGAR Next. Okay, so with that, I am going to turn it over to you, Tony.
All right, thanks, Nikki. So Tony Hickey with Donnelly Financial here at EFIN. We are going to talk through the enrollment process and user roles. If you could flip to the next slide and maybe one more. All right, so for those of you who have not yet enrolled, we're just going to talk through the EDGAR Next enrollment process. So as Nikki said, in order to enroll, you do need to gather information. You need to have your CIK, your CCC, and your passphrase. And that's all the information that you need to enroll. You can go to login.gov, set up your account, you can do your enrollment there. Up until Monday, or I guess end of day Friday, if you do not have your passphrase, we can get a code sent to you to resubmit it. It will go to your EDGAR point of contact today, and we can get a new passphrase for you. Once we hit September 15th, we will not have the ability to do that anymore, which means if you do not have your passphrase, you will need to fill out a Form ID in order to get enrolled in EDGAR Next. So that's something really important to be aware of. So you gather all your information, you go to login.gov, you set up your login.gov account. You're going to have to set up Auth0. We do recommend that when you set up your login.gov, you provide multiple authentication methods. Don't just use email, do text, because if for any reason you lose your phone and that was where you were set up, you will have to delete your login.gov account and recreate it. And if you have multiple people that have delegated to you, that all has to be redone. It's not anything that's saved. And that is something that we did get guidance from SEC on. So you set up your login.gov account. You decide who your account administrators are going to be. As Nikki said, you're required to have one or two, depending on what type of company you're enrolling. We recommend a minimum of two, just because if someone's out of the office, if you need something, you want to make sure you have two. You can have up to 20. Choose which confirmation quarter you want your annual confirmation to be. We're recommending that you do 6/30 of 2026. Because if you choose 9/30 or you choose 12/31, you will have to do that annual confirmation again in 2025. If you were enrolled today and choose 6/30, that allows you to kind of bump that out as far as possible. And then basically you can enroll. So once you've done all that, you can go online, you can enroll. You're going to provide your information for each CIK you're enrolling, determine who your account administrators are, choose your confirmation quarter, and then enroll. And then once you enroll, when you enroll, it will change your CCC automatically. It'll give you a brand new one. Obviously, you might have that CCC out there in the universe with people that file on your behalf. We do recommend that you go in and revert that to what it was prior to enrollment if you choose to, so that you won't have to go in multiple places, either internally or externally, and update that CCC information. Anyone that you invite to be an account admin on your behalf after you enroll will need to go and accept that enrollment, right? They will need to go in, create their own login.gov account, accept the ability to be an account admin on your behalf. And then once you're enrolled, you'll have to go in and add any users that will file on your behalf. So if there are any users that also file through an application or directly, they will need to be added as a user to the account. And not only do they have to be a user on the account, they need to be a user on every CIK. So let's say you enroll 10 CIKs, you're going to have to add those users to every CIK. And if you follow the delegation process within there, there's a button that says add all users. That kind of makes it pretty easy for you to do that. So yeah, I think that is it for the enrollment process. If you want to flip to the next screen. Just wanting to talk about understanding the different user roles that are available as part of EDGAR Next. There's essentially 3 of them. There's an account administrator that is someone that can add or remove admins or users. They're able to perform delegations on behalf of the CIK. They'll perform the annual confirmations, and they can update, change company information such as the CCC, et cetera. They also, the first account admin that you generate will also become the EDGAR point of contact, which means anytime anything is filed on behalf of that CIK, they will get notification of that via email, and be aware of all filings and any suspensions. If EDGAR, if SEC has to reach out for anything, they'll be that person that they're coming to. Then there's also a user role. So that's anyone who is going to be able to file on behalf of the CIC or the CIK, sorry, and will be able to also view company information, address, CIK, CCC, et cetera. And then the third and probably least common is a technical administrator. If you are using any of the API calls for EDGAR, a technical administrator would be required. They manage the filer API token, and they also perform a refresh of the token annually. User tokens for EDGAR Next do expire every 30 days, but the API filer token only expires once a year. So anyone that is going to file on behalf, not only do they need to be delegated on that CIK, they need to have a valid user token in order to file, or they're going to get an error back saying that you don't have authority to file on behalf of that CIK. We have asked the SEC to kind of increase their EDGAR messaging a little bit to let our filers know whether it's an issue with delegation versus a token specific issue, just to make it more clear for folks so they're not trying to chase down what does this error message mean when it's kind of one error that's coming out for multiple things. You can have up to 20 account administrators on your account, and you can have up to 500 users on each enrolled CIK. And I think that is it for enrollment and user roles. And I will turn it back over to Nikki to talk about some lessons learned and common pitfalls that we've seen.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Sure.
Okay, so the first would like to share some of the real world lessons that we have learned from these early adopters. Just want to start with the kind of difficult one to do now, but to start early, right? You know, you really want to define that scope. Even if you're starting today, you want to just dedicate some time to just defining your scope. You want to make sure that you don't underestimate the time you're going to actually need to, you know, to enroll the CIKs and to set them up properly so that there's no disruptions come September 15th. And then just keep in mind when your next filing will be, right? When are you planning to make your next submission? So you want to try to do this during a quiet period. So really try to pick a day that is not going to, that there won't be any filings made. So you can do that enrollment from beginning to end. Now, when I mentioned defining your scope, really you want to make sure you identify all of your CIKs that's in your organizational structure. So this includes, of course, the issuing company, any parent or holding company, any registered guarantors on that public debt, any registered subsidiaries, your directors and officers, affiliates, right? Affiliates, you want to make sure you at least as a courtesy reach out to them and alert them to EDGAR Next. It's possible they might not be aware. And these are like, for example, let's say like your 5% or more shareholders that are non-institutional. Then trust, right? All of your trusts registered needs to be enrolled and set up as well as if you have any registered stock option plans. These are plans with CIKs. Also, just, we've learned that, coordination is very critical here, not only internally, but also externally. So from an internal front, you want to make sure that you're aligned with your legal department, for example, and your compliance and your team and your accounting team, right? Everyone should be in alignment. The accounts, your EDGAR Next accounts should be set up in a manner that allows all individuals to play a role, whether it's an account administrator or a user, right? Or a technical administrator. You want to just make sure that you're coordinating with everybody in the team. And then delegation. So what we've seen time and time again is that the CIKs, you'll enroll the CIK, and then delegation will not happen. So delegation is not part of the enrollment process in terms of in the system. After you've enrolled, you'll go into the EDGAR Next dashboard and actually delegate filing authority. So as an account administrator, that account administrator has the permissions to go into the EDGAR Next account, into the dashboard, and delegate filing authority to another CIK. So this is where you should be delegating filing authority to, for example, your filing agents, your outside counsel if they're making filings using their filing agent CIK, or to other entities. Let's say you have your director officer account that you've enrolled. You want to delegate filing authority potentially to that issuing entity. So you really want to make sure you don't skip this step and spend some time here identifying all of your delegated filers. Okay, next up is officers and directors. So want to just make sure you're aware that the CCC does change upon enrollment. So as Tony mentioned, it'll reset automatically when you enroll. So this can cause an issue for any other company that officer or director sits on their board. Because if they're not made aware of that new CCC, they're not going to essentially have access to that EDGAR account to make submissions. So you want to just make sure that you there's ways that you can revert the CCC back to the previous value. This allows you to maintain consistency. But obviously at this point, when you've got other boards involved, it's really critical that you coordinate with them. That's going back to my statement earlier about coordination being critical, being key here. You want to make sure you're coordinating with any other public company boards that those officers or directors sit on to make sure that you're all in agreement in the roles that each company will play on that EDGAR account. Also, just want to point out here, officers and directors, they do not require their own EDGAR Next login.gov access unless they actually plan to manage their own EDGAR accounts. So what we generally see here, or what we have been seeing here quite often, is where folks are having their directors and officers actually sign up for login.gov accounts and access their own EDGAR Next dashboard. So this is this can be done, but it is they're not required to. So long as you are considered authorized to enroll that director or officer under the final rule, if you have the codes, if you have the CCC and the passphrase for that CIK, you're considered authorized to enroll that individual into EDGAR Next. So just want to make sure we share here that the officers and directors do not require their own EDGAR Next login.gov credentials unless they are going to actively manage their own EDGAR accounts. We usually only see this for those professional directors who are really, they don't have a central company or central board. They're really acting professional career directors. So last point on officers and directors, you want to make sure you determine who is going to enroll that filer. If they report, if they report with more than one company. So just make sure that the coordination with the other public company boards, that you understand who is actually going to enroll that director officer, who's going to be the account administrators, who's going to delegate filing authority if they are that account administrator. So just few things to keep in mind here with regards to these real world lessons. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so let's discuss some of the common pitfalls we've seen in the enrollment process. So number one item here is really insufficient training or awareness for those that are going to be the account administrators. It's really critical that you get up to speed on everything EDGAR Next. So as an account administrator, you feel very comfortable managing those EDGAR Next accounts. So getting training, there's a ton of resources out there now, whether it's through Broadridge's site or, for example, on the SEC. The SEC has quite a large number of videos on YouTube walking through the enrollment process. And then next thing is the next common pitfall is having invalid codes. So the CIK, CCC, and passphrase are required to enroll in EDGAR Next. The CCC and the passphrase must both be valid and current. And then current is defined as reset or established after September 20th, 2019. So what we're seeing is in many cases, the passphrase is not current or it's missing. So if you do not have the CCC, a valid CCC, that's where we can't avert the form ID, which I'll talk about more in a moment. But the passphrase can be reset, right? That can be reset so that you can enroll. It's important to note here that the passphrase reset, in that process, a token is generated, and that token is submitted to or emailed to the EDGAR point of contact on file. So just keep that in mind, that you need to first identify who the EDGAR point of contact is on the EDGAR system for that CIK, because that email is going to be where that passphrase token, reset token is delivered. Okay, next, the next common pitfall is not identifying all of your possible filing agents or just all of your delegated filers. So it's really important to really do a thorough analysis of who your delegated filers are today, as well as who you could be using or have used in the past. And then also keeping in mind any delegated filers that pertain to other public company boards that individuals will sit on, or maybe it's a broker that's filing a Schedule 13D or G for an individual. So just keep those in mind, that really do perform a thorough analysis of all of your delegated filers. Next is the EDGAR hours. So it's important to note here that EDGAR Next is open the same time the EDGAR hours are open. So 6 a.m. weekdays, 6 a.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern. So this is when assistance can be provided on EDGAR Next. This is also when submissions can be provided on EDGAR. And that's also when you have the access to the EDGAR dashboard. So just keep in mind, coverage is important here. You want to make sure that you are covering those EDGAR Next accounts from 6 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, right? So in case something pops up, you have a plan in place there. So coverage is important. When you have maybe one or two account administrators, this is where you want to make sure that you have brought in account administrators that will also provide that coverage for you in case something does pop up outside of those normal business hours. Okay. Next is, I mentioned this before, but just to reiterate, coordinating when, not coordinating, I should say, when directors or other Section 16 officers serve on other boards is another common pitfall. So just, things like resetting those CCCs, really critical coordination points, setting up account administrators, right? Another really important coordination point with those other boards. So it's really important to stay in coordination with them, not only at enrollment, but also throughout the EDGAR Next process. You'll want to have a coordination plan in place for the other boards. Next is not confirming the account administrator acceptance. So essentially when you add an account administrator into your EDGAR Next account, that individual has 14 days to accept the account administrator invitation. So it's just very important that you follow up with that individual, whether it's via email, but you want to make sure, or phone, you want to make sure though that they have, or that they do accept that account administrator invitation within that 14-day timeline. Okay, next is improperly filling out the Form ID or submitting the Form ID. So right now, the Form IDs are taking approximately 7 business days, sometimes longer. We're really seeing in real time, it's more like 10 business days to be reviewed by the SEC. So, and then if the Form ID is rejected, the next submission, returns back to the queue. So you really want to be prepared for any delays as it pertains to Form IDs. But then it's also important to understand when you need to submit a Form ID. So that Form ID is only required if you're an existing filer, if you've lost access to your CCC and your passphrase, right? If you're just missing that passphrase, you can do the reset, right? But if you don't have a valid CCC, you really cannot pass go. You'd have to submit a Form ID, all right? And that's up until September 12th. Now, if you don't have access, right, it's past September 12th, right, you want to make sure that you get that Form ID submitted at your earliest. It will need to be properly notarized and signed. And then you want to make sure that the filer's business title is applicant if they're signing on their own behalf, and then make sure the POA's business title is power of attorney if you're signing on behalf of the filer. So just some key points to share here on Form ID to reduce the possibility of that application being rejected. Okay, so with that, let's open this up to any questions. Feel free to share and any questions you have, you can place it in the chat and Tony or I will jump in and respond.
Oh boy.
No questions?
We have anything we want to throw at Nikki or Tony today? Alrighty, if there isn't anything, you're more than welcome to send me an email if you'd like after this, if you think of anything, and I can get you in touch with either of the speakers. So again, feel free to shoot anything at me and I'll make sure, to try and get it answered for you. And I guess with that, I'm just going to say thank you for joining us. A huge thank you to Nikki and Tony and for being back with us, really. You've helped with webinars at the annual conference, so we really appreciate you being here with us. And I also wanted to take a quick moment to just mention our December regional event. We did open registration for that, and we will be at Pfizer in New York City. So we'll have more on content and panels and all that coming soon, but the registration is available now if you'd like to go and take a look at what we have. And with that, I will just say, I hope everybody has a good rest of your day.
Yes, thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.